Sonny Onoo here. Remember? The guy who's always taking a selfie? You remember me from WCW days? Well, I'm on Hannibal TV, and you don't want to miss what I have to say, because I'm going to be talking about North Korea, Japan, New Japan, WCW, and all the stuff that happened behind the scene, and how I got here in Middle Iowa. Don't forget to watch Hannibal TV, coming at you right now. And if you want to fight, here it is. Ha!
We are with Sonny Onoo, legendary WCW manager and the liaison between WCW and Japan, as well as the best bantamweight kickboxer in the world for a number of years. He's going to tell us more about that, but welcome to the Hannibal TV. How are you today?
Oh, great, and thank you so much. And I'm actually really honored to be included in Hannibal TV, because it's really kind of getting a little famous. There was all the great people that you guys are interviewing, so to be included in that, and you know, likes of Eric Bischoff, my pal, and Kevin Sullivan, and all the other greats. So I'm actually flattered and honored.
Well, let's start it off. I know you were born in Japan. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how, you know, how life turns and who we end up with. And I was very fortunate that my mother and my two younger sister immigrated to this country in like 1963, 64. Not exactly sure, but you know, went through Hawaii, educated in Fairbanks, Alaska, of all the places, and realizing that your pee can actually freeze on contact. That was a very interesting thing coming from Japan and having this weather experience. But you know, learning English. I was 11 years old when I first came here, and so it was quite the experience. But I am fortunate that I was involved in martial arts, and through martial arts, I got to experience a lot of things. And one of the things came out of that was befriending a guy named Eric Bischoff, who also fought in kickboxing back in the days. We traveled the country just so we can go and fight people and not get arrested.
And we know you did point tournaments, which I think is what Eric was doing with you. But you were also part of the Professional Kickboxing Association, which was the major league of kickboxing for a while there, right? Yeah,
PKA was actually conceived with a guy named by Joe Corley, and actually was on CBS, you know, sports, and a guy named by Gordon Franks up in Minneapolis, who was a super lightweight champion of the world. I trained with him, and likes of Pat Worley. Those are the kind of legendary martial artists from in my days, and you know, I got an opportunity to fight a couple of great champions and people who became a champion after I fought them. And, you know, certainly we didn't do it for the money. Just like a lot of things that, you know, we were way ahead of the times, because this was way before MMA. But it was just a good time. You know, we just wanted to see how far we can take ourselves, you know.
I heard you say in another interview that you guys would often fight on the big boxing cards, but as a preliminary fight. Did you ever get the opportunity to be on any bigger events?
No, I guess, you know, I got to fight some great fighters, but no, yeah, we were kind of like a novelty card when the kickboxing first started for boxing fans, and I'm not sure how many boxing fans really like, you know, a couple guys coming in and start kicking. Although they got few woos and ahs when you kick them in the head, you know. There was two different type of leagues at the time. It was a PKA, Professional Karate Association, and WKA, which is the World Kickboxing, World Karate Association. And the two difference was, the only really rule difference was that And WK, you could kick below the waist, meaning not to the groin, but to the leg kick, like a lot like you see a Thai boxer, and certainly K1 is that became famous afterward in later years, and those are different. I prefer above the waist kicking because I think he actually makes fighter use head kicks, and of course, as you know, spectacle of the fight itself, you know, head kicks knockout or head kicks alone is fun to watch versus, you know, people kicking each other in the legs. So although I understand the theory behind why you train and why you take the guy's wheels out, but I don't know if that makes for a great, you know, it certainly makes it a brutal fight, but I don't know for myself, you know, I like the above the waist kicking better. And although having said that, you know, at Turner Broadcasting, we were the first one to bring K1 into this country. Eric has allowed me to give me a little bit of freedom to bring something outside of wrestling while I was with him at WCW, which we were the #1 pay-per-view company at the time. So, you know, he let me explore some of the stuff, and there was a gentleman named by Ishii, Chairman Ishii, who was head of K1 at the time, and you know we were the one who brought K1 into United States, introduced the U.S. fans, and of course that there was a pride there as well, and I mean there's all kind of opportunity we had actually at Turner.
Now with PKA in those days when it was at its peak, kick pads were worn and foot pads were worn. There was no headgear, and usually the fighters would wear long pants covering the kick pads. What do you think about that compared to today when it's just shin on shin kicking?
Well, I think, you know, just like anything else, I think fighter has absolutely evolved. You know, there was a guy named by Benoit, who was American champion out of California, and this man fought under PKA and WKA. And he fought under WKA rule, which is, you know, leg kicks. I think they had an option of wearing pads on their feet, but he certainly didn't. And you know, he became one of the greatest fighters on the WKA banner. And you know, and even to this day, I think most of us fear him.
And you mentioned this guy's name to me off camera, and because I'm going to be interviewing him next week, I'll just ask you your opinion of him on camera. But I think he was 24-time world champion Jean-Yves Thériault in kickboxing. What's your opinion of him as a fighter? I know you ran into him a few times.
Yeah, I mean, we never fought on the same card, but I certainly seen him fight. You know, one of the greatest things about Johnny Thériault was that he was smooth. You know, he was a gentleman always. That's one of the things that I missed about some of the MMA fights now, and even some of the kickboxing fight that you see. You know, the martial art, the respect of the fighters, respect of the opponent, that kind of got in the way. You know, that's kind of, you know, left the arena. And I understand they're trying to hype the fight and, you know, doing the face off and doing all the antics, try to hype the fight. But I do miss that part of, you know, the respect. Look, you know, they're gonna get in the ring and they're gonna do everything they can within that rules and within themselves to beat the other guys, you know. But I do miss that respect part of it, you know, the honor part of the martial arts.
Would Glory Kickboxing be the biggest kickboxing league around now, or is there others in Japan that I don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's Glory is certainly on television, and I think that's the primary, actually, the program that is out there, and you know, a lot of my old friends are still involved in that company, but there's so many great stuff. I have opportunity to work with Fight TV, where Hannibal TV is on as well, and I've been fortunate enough to work with them by COO, who's Michael Weber, who I worked with together at WCW back in the days, and I had got to bring some content from overseas. And what's great about Fight TV right now is that you as a fan can watch some of the stuff you'll never get a chance to watch, and vice versa. Their fan all over the world get to see professional wrestling. Some of the great independent guys you never get to see because they're not on national television or on network TV. One of the great things that we did was we brought Lafay, which is the Burma-based bare knuckle kickboxing, which you can check that out on Fight TV, and it's older version of Thai boxing. Everybody know what Thai boxing is, and Lafay is elbow, headbutt, bare knuckle fighting. I mean, it's and the greatest thing about it's traditional rules they use. So you can beat my butt for 10 minutes, and long as there's no knockout, there's no winner and losers.
Interesting.
Yeah. So only way you can beat the other guy is the doctor stops the fight, or you knock the guy out, or you give up. That's it. So it's kind of that traditional that I don't know how safe it is, but it is something to watch. You see somebody just take a punishment for 10 minutes, and you think the guy who was doing all the beating should have won, but respectfully, they're considered a draw.
Now, the last thing I'll ask you about kickboxing, I'll ask you more about this off camera, but for an up and coming kickboxer, what's the best advice you would give a up and coming competitive kickboxer as far as fighting goes?
Well, I think even like you, who's kind of dabbling in kickboxing, I think getting a good trainer, getting somebody who have experience in that art form, and understanding the rules, whether it's a bare knuckle fighting or whether above waist kickboxing, or whether it's what's most of the kickboxing rule now, which is the leg kicks allowed. So you need to prepare yourself for that. One of the great champion, Mr. Ledoux, is he's the Lafay World Heavyweight Champion. He's from Canada. So it's really funny. The perception of American is we're the center of the universe here, but there's a great fighter, a whole bunch of great fighters that came out of from your territory, which is from Canada, and I think I don't know if it's the water or the cold weather you guys have, but there's a lot of tough guys come out of there, and like Johnny Thuria we talked about earlier, he's one of the smoothest gentleman fighters that I remember.
Now, you mentioned you met Eric Bischoff through martial arts. What was your first impressions of Eric Bischoff when you met him?
We were young guys. We were both. I think Eric is maybe 7 months younger than I am. So we were basically same age. He blew his knee out. He was a wrestler, actually, a collegiate wrestler, and he still had a lot of competition blood in him. So he got into martial arts. He worked at one of the karate schools, and one of the things he would love to do is to go to karate tournaments. And we were all poor, so we had no money. So and I happened to have a van, and we would travel on a weekend to a karate tournament. And Eric Bischoff, certainly back in the days, he was one of the toughest guys, I think. And I mentioned this before on a couple other interviews, but what I remember about Eric Bischoff fighting in the karate tournaments, that he got DQ'd a lot.
So did you live in Minneapolis at that time as well?
No, as you know, I live in Iowa, which is about 2 hours from Minneapolis, and so on the weekends I would go up to train with those guys. tour up and spend a weekend training with those guys. And certainly when I was training with boxing, up there when I was getting ready for a kickboxing fight, we would go up there and train.
And you mentioned in another interview that Eric Bischoff had a very young girlfriend at that time.
Well, actually, it's current wife. I mean,
Okay.
Lori is petite, even now, very beautiful. And I mean, he got lucky on that one. And what happened was, we traveled, we become brothers in martial arts, and one day he's going to introduce me to his new girlfriend, and I can picture this even now. We were at Highway 100, the Old Radisson, which it's where they have the Diamond National Karate Tournament now. I don't know what the hotel is called now, but I remember, we're going to meet him there for drink. It was me and my wife, Julie, and we got to meet Lori, and I he introduces Lori to us, and I had to pull Eric to the side, and I said, look, I said, Eric, man, I said, what are you doing? I said, she looked like she's 14 years old. What do you, she's a petite, very, beautiful young lady, but she looked like she was 16 at best. That was my guess. But turned out that certainly she was the legal age. Didn't mean to accuse Eric of breaking any laws, but and I said, Eric, you're gonna go to jail, man. I said, you and then he assured me that she was that age. So, but lucky for him, they're still together, and they have two beautiful kids, Montana and Garrett, and we have obviously through martial arts and wrestling, we're they've been here, they've been in Mason City, Iowa, and the only reason they would come here to visit me. So you probably figured it out already.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, how did your business relationship with Eric begin?
I think one of the most interesting things was, Eric was doing a lot of things. I think after he was managing at martial arts school, I believe it was called the USA Karate, and he was a manager, salesperson at the karate school in Bloomington, Minnesota, and he was doing, we're all poor. We're actually not really thinking about how we're going to get ahead. We're more interested in how we're going to get to the tournament next weekend. Maybe he was better than I was, but at least that's where my heads were. And Eric was actually, struggling just like I was, but he was actually, and he's a great salesman, by the way. And he was actually selling door-to-door meat. I think that's hard to do. I think that's harder, almost as hard to do as selling a vacuum cleaner door-to-door. So, one day, as we were traveling, I said, Eric, I got this game that I kind of come up with. And he says, and he was willing to try. I said, you got to see our kids play this game. And it was we called it Ninja Star Wars. And it was actually a Velcro ninja stars that we threw at each other, and we made a kind of storyline. There was headbands and eye goggles and a vest that these Velcro would stick to. And we came up with two different scenarios of the games, capturing a flag and that kind of thing. And we had a little storyline that we read. And Eric says, knowing he said, we got to get this on TV. We got to sell this thing. So with help of Eric and we kind of combined our resource together. Had a guy, I think gentleman name was Mr. Shen, out of Chicago. It was a Korean guy who had a martial art supply store. Had to manufacture the game, and Eric went to, we got to get this on TV. And I have no way. I don't know anything about television. And he says, well, let me see if we can go talk to these guys, Vern Gagne and AWA. So, so some of you guys can't blame me for how Eric got in the wrestling business. So Eric takes this game and goes to AWA, speak with Vern and those guys, and says, "Hey, you know, you have a commercial time that they get from being on national syndicated television show, you know, and we'll split the money with you from this sale of game." So Eric shot the commercial with my Karate Kids that I had. We used them on a commercial, and I think Eric directed the commercial, kids playing kind of like this setting, you know, hiding behind a couch, throwing desk, telling the stories, and shot the commercial, and got to be on national television on syndicated TV through AWA shows, and you know, we didn't make any money, but we learned a lot, and one of the best things ever happened out of that deal was Eric Bischoff got a job as AWA, as I think he got a job as selling syndicated show, syndicate, you know, AWA shows, and that's how he got in. And then through that, and Eric can tell you the better story because I really don't know. I only know what I heard from him, is that, you know, one day announcer, they show up on the AWA shows, television taping, and they put a you know, sports coat on him, and he was, you know, he's a good looking guy, certainly, you know, 20 some years old. I think he was even doing some modeling at the time, and you know, they put a microphone on him and started interviewing the wrestlers, and that's how he got in front of the camera and became an announcer.
Did you have any interest at all in wrestling when you were younger? Were you a fan at all?
Amateur wrestling, you know, certainly professional wrestling, because we're in AWA territory here,
right.
Certainly. So, you know, they used to come to town. There's a Catholic school here called Newman High School. They would come once or twice a year, and, you know, and they would do their shows, you know, you know, the Crushers and you know, Mr. Zumov, and, you know, even so you know, Vern Gagne. Those are the crowd that used to come down here from AWA days.
Did you ever meet Mr. Zumov there? He's had a lot of legal issues recently.
Yeah. He's been down here a few times. I mean, certainly on a show, and I got to meet him a few times, I think.
But you never knew him personally?
No.
Okay. Now, what was the way that Eric got you involved in WCW? Obviously, for people that don't know, he climbed the ranks in AWA. He went on to become hired by WCW, and he worked his way into, I believe, executive vice president position with the company. Right.
So obviously, you know, Eric and I are dear friends, even to this day. I mean, I chat with him probably once every couple of weeks. And, you know, and I kind of follow him in his great podcast, and he's #1 podcast right now, the 83 Weeks. So, you know, I get to watch his shows or listen to his shows, and throughout that, my name gets mentioned once in a while because you know, they go back in history of all the stuff, and of course, you know, what happened after Eric certainly hired me to help him with some of the international stuff. So what really happened was, I was, you know, it's a tail end of my martial arts career, fighting in tournaments, and, you know, I would only make few appearances in some of the tournament, and I was competing in non-combative part of competition, which is called the form competition. And I had my health club and karate school here in Mason City, and one day I get a phone call from Eric, and he said, and he knows I'm a car nut, so he just bought himself a black vet, and he was driving home from work from CNN Center to his home in outskirt of Atlanta, and he's telling me all about his cars. He says, "Hey, I just got this vet. It's great." I said, "Yeah." I said, "Eric, so what's going on?" And he said, "By the way, I'm trying to do some business in Japan." I said, you still speak fluent Japanese, don't you?" I said, yeah. He says, how'd you like to go to Japan with me, next couple weeks? I said, sure. I said, long as you buy a ticket, I'll go. So, and even that time, he says to me, because Eric and I wanted to do kickboxing shows, bring the martial arts history of us back to the television. So we had a few ideas of how we could do that, and we talked about it. So he says, as the meeting gets going, he says, there's an opportunity, and you'll know when I start talking about karate, then you can kind of cue in and, start talking about the martial art, doing maybe a kickboxing show. I said, great. So he said, well, I'll call you next week. So he kind of gave me a date that we were going to leave. And I don't know if Eric will remember this, but I'm thinking to myself, come Monday, Tuesday, God, I thought he was talking about us leaving on Thursday or something. So I finally called him, and I go, at his office actually, and he was always nice enough to pick up my call. And he says, yeah. And on the other end, the guy's busy, so he's trying to get you off the phone kind of situation. So I say, hey, how you doing? And trying to make small talk, and I can tell he was busy. And he says to me, he says, well, yeah, I'll talk to you, later on. And I said, well, but before you go, I said, Eric, are we still going to Japan like Thursday? And he said, this was his classic Eric Bischoff. He goes, you're the guy I was talking to. I'll call you right back. And certainly he called me back and he says, yeah, can you be here like Thursday? I got your ticket out of Atlanta and we can go. And actually, that's how I ended up going to Japan. Now, the best part of this story is that Sonny Onoo have no idea about what's about to take place in Japan. So I'm getting a free trip to Japan, go eat some good food. Hopefully we can talk about our project of martial art, kickboxing. So, not knowing anything that have taken place between WCW and New Japan. So we have a meeting with New Japan. And Eric says, look, don't worry about it. Don't say anything. If we get opportunity, we'll talk about the kickboxing. Great. So we go to TV Asahi television studio, and they had a conference room. And this is the first time I meet Riki Choshu, who, scariest looking big Japanese guy. And then you got Masa Saito, who's 64 Olympian, and most of a lot of the American wrestling fan knows who Masa Saito is, who just happened to pass away last week, who was very kind to me with all the thing about wrestling.
Not on that day though.
Yeah, no, I didn't know him, and he's got one lazy eyes, so when he's looking at you, you don't know if he's looking at you and you don't know which eyeball to follow, but.
And he was also involved in that. He wasn't there for when Ken Patera threw the rock through the window, but
he got arrested.
He was involved with a scuffle with the police after
right,
he got
right, yeah, and he ended up doing time in Wisconsin,
So he's a tough guy.
Oh, legit tough, scary guy. Then you got Mr. Sakaguchi, who was part of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's about 6. He's a big Japanese guy. He's probably 6'3", heavyweight judo champion. And then we had Mr. Baisho, who was their financing guy. But these are scary looking Japanese guys. And I don't know if we were on the same level when we were talking, but what I remember, at least in my mind, that they were a little bit up on a platform, and they were up here, and here's Eric and I, and Tiger Hattori, Mr. Hattori, their famous referee for New Japan Pro Wrestling, who still works with this company even to this day. who speaks fluent English because he's a Japanese guy like me, but lives in New York. So Hattori, as we go into the meeting, and mind you, I don't know anything about what took place between two companies. So first time I'm hearing this is the word that's coming out of Eric Bischoff's mouth. So Mr. Hattori says to me, he goes, "You translate." And I wasn't expecting to do that. I was just supposed to stay quiet. So I get put on the spot. So okay, and it's interesting thing enough. My Japanese is my 11-year-old Japanese because that's when I left Japan. So because in Japan, as in a lot of country, certainly in Asian country, people talk different with how they address people, and I address yourself against somebody who's older or senior. So it's a little bit different. So with that, I'm translating what Eric Bischoff is saying to these Japanese scary guys. For the first time, I'm hearing it and translating. So it turns out that prior management of WCW has taken upward of $500,000 out of New Japan, an agreement to do a talent exchange, to send WCW talent to New Japan for their tours or their shows.
And that's Bill Watts' regime, right?
I believe so. And unfortunately, reason why these guys look like they wanted to kill us and stick us in Sumida River, because none of these guys are really talking, right? I mean, they're just looking at us like, why you guys are here, kind of look. And turns out that as I'm listening to Eric and as I'm translating, that Eric is apologizing for the debacle of not sending any talent, and basically just took all their money and not sent the talent. And I'm hearing this and going like, oh, now I'm understanding why these guys look like they want to kill us, because I'm representing a company that took their money.
So Eric didn't give you any warning?
No, none. He gave me no heads up whatsoever. I'm sweating bullets. And basically, Eric was there to rekindle their relationship, or this relationship. And Eric's a pretty smart guy, and he says, listen, let me try to make that up for you, without you guys paying us, because you already paid us. So let me, under my regime, I'm in charge, let me try to make up for the money that you paid for with the service that we promised you. So all of a sudden, Masa Saito says to me in Japanese, who is going to be our contact person? Because the problem always has been is I will contact the office, and by the time I got an answer that we were requesting the talent, we couldn't make the logistic work. We didn't have enough lead time to advertise and a lot of other stuff. So there was communication was really issue. So without skipping a beat, Eric says, oh, that'll be Sonny. And I'm looking at him like, when did I start working for you? So in essence, at that moment, that's how I got into wrestling business.
So what was your contract like for that job? Because I guess you didn't quit your businesses here. No,
and I said, afterward, Eric kind of whispered to me, and he says, don't worry. He says, look, all you have to do is answer the phone, tell me what they want, and we'll make it happen.
So you received like a yearly.
I think it was something like $18,000 a year to answer telephone and make sure this communication channel was open. And Eric was always kind enough that and they knew that Eric and I was friends, so he would always I'd be able to get in touch with the man in charge, and that was a big issue back then. So and that's how it happened. Was with also there was a Brad Reagans who worked for New Japan, was dear all-time high school friend of Eric Bischoff, and he's the kind of try to set this thing, kind of rekindle this relationship. So with Brad and I working together, we got things done, and that's how the New Japan WCW relationship blossom, to say the least.
Did you deal with any of the WCW guys that were being sent over there directly? Were you the one talking to them?
Yeah, because some of the tours that they would go on, I got to go on a tour with them. Randy Savage, Road Warrior Hawk, there was a few issues with those guys, and Ric Flair, and because they would do a big show, and our big guys would go on their big shows, Tokyo Dome shows and Osaka Dome shows and Fukuoka Dome shows. What people in the United States probably don't understand is that when Japan has big shows like the New Year, January 4th Tokyo Dome show, I mean, you're talking about 30, 40,000 people in the arena, and that's in essence their big pay-per-view, kind of like the big show that we have here, and it's pretty crazy when you go to see it, and when you see a wrestling show with that many people, so.
And you mentioned Hawk and Savage. Animal actually told me a story once. I don't know if you can confirm or deny it, that in Japan they actually had a backstage.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was right there. I was right in the middle of it because Ricky Choshu yelling at me. I can't remember who we were, but there was wife, girlfriend involved, and they both live in Tampa at the time. And there was some issue about that, and I'm not exactly sure, that part of it, but there was definitely heat. And they hit Randy Savage music, and I think he was one of the main event guy, might have been main event match. And in the back of the curtain, Randy Savage and Hawk is going at it. I mean, they're like going at it. I mean, they're face to face about to go, and music hits, and he's not going out. And Enrique Choshu's coming at me. Says, what the F is going on in Japanese, and actually they had to stop the music because there was actually, and I imagine me, I'm weighing about 135 pounds soaking wet, trying to get in these two guys.
Savage was huge at that time.
Oh yeah, and I have to go, excuse me, but your music is playing, so that kind of thing. But I don't think he ever came to a blow. But I know, from what I understand, they ran into each other a few months after that on the beach in Tampa, and there was actually physical altercation.
Now, you dealt with both of those guys on a personal level, and I'm going to assume that your dealings with them were pretty good overall, other than...
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had a great... I mean, both those guys, believe it or not. Hawk was here. He actually came here. And I can't remember what was the reason why he came here. But I remember he came here, wanted to drive... Like I told you earlier that I'm a car nut. So he wanted to drive my Porsche, and so of course he gets in it and goes like 80 miles an hour and 25 miles on, and he gets pulled over, and lucky for him, people recognized him, and we didn't get a ticket. But he would put his all gimmick on, and he'd been to show and tell for my kids at their elementary schools. And you know what? Randy Savage did the same thing. He came here. One day we're up in Minneapolis. I think we stayed at the Marriott after the WCW event. And his flight wasn't until that evening. And the night before we were at the bar. And I had bought Randy Savage, which I still have, Macho Man Randy Savage, Harley Davidson. And he says, Randy says, well, let's go down there and promote that bike. I said, really? It's a 2-hour drive and 2-hour back. He said, yeah, tomorrow morning. I said, sure enough, he met me at the Marriott where we were staying, and we drove down, did some Photoshop for the local paper and television at the Harley Davidson shop here, and he had time to kill. He went to my kids' school, and you know, so my kids been really lucky for their show and tell. They had Road Warrior Hawk. Buff Bagwell been down here, did the same thing, was a Patriot, and Road Warrior Hawk and Macho Man's been there show and tell at their schools.
I'm surprised Buff Bagwell did it with all the stories you hear about Bagwell.
You know, Buff. Well, this was early on, right? So they were when he was still teamed up as the Patriot.
Yeah, in the early
American
90s,
Male, maybe. I forget what they were.
I think the American Males was even after that.
Oh, is that right?
But, yeah.
But anyway, they were here.
Scotty Riggs was with American Males.
Okay. Yeah, this is when he was still with the Patriot.
Yeah.
And yeah, he came. They worked out at my gym. Went to, you know, a lot of show and tell with my kids. I mean, those guys were all generous.
Now, Steve Austin, I guess he tore his tricep when he was in Japan. Wasn't that what caused the whole him being released or something?
Yeah, but that was before I was involved.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like in '93, I think. And,
Okay.
You know, yeah, and I didn't get involved till I was '94. So he was still with the company, I think, but you know, I didn't get to know him very much.
Yeah, you didn't have any dealings with him.
Right.
Now, Tiger Hattori, you mentioned that he is a referee. He's been a referee for a long time, but obviously he has an office position. What is exactly his office position with New Japan?
Well, from what I understand, but he is the contact person for working with all the foreigners, mostly American talent. Of course, they have a deal. You know, they have working relationships with Ring of Honor, so a lot of their talent is through Ring of Honor. But there's other guys, you know, Mr. Hoy from Texas, and there's other guys that works in New Japan shows that they do, and you know, New Japan is, arguably speaking, they're the number 2 company in the world right now. It might be a little distance between, certainly with WWE, but I think their product is alternative to certainly some of the wrestling fans.
What do you think about the big Madison Square Garden show coming up next year with Ring of Honor in New Japan?
I think it's great because it gives, you know, if you look back to history, I think WCW was the best thing. When it became rival to WWE, I think it was the best thing that happened to WWE. You know, made both company work harder. And that competition is good for anything, right? I mean, really. It makes us better. It makes us faster or leaner or stronger or be able to, as far as company goes, to produce a better product.
And it made wrestling more popular as well. If you look at the combined rating back then,
my gosh.
It hasn't even touched it now.
Absolutely. And think about the stuff that came out of that. I mean, talent got paid more money because there was another place to go who was paying more money. Now, I mean, everybody knows Eric and I are great friends, but, you know, I often understand what the knock on Eric Bischoff is a lot of times, you know. And I understand. I mean, I know him well. I'm sure doing a negotiation, he could be pretty stiff, I'm sure. But end of the day, because of nucleus of what he created with Nitro and Thunder and bringing WCW to the level where it surpassed, as Eric and you show on 83 Weeks, he allowed us, certainly the talent, to get paid more money. Not for nothing. You know what I mean? And he really changed how the guys were getting paid. So, you know, knowing what I know very little, but it was great for the fans. It was great for the talent. And end of the day, I think it was great for company. So competition is great. And I hope that this alternative thing that they're trying to do, New Japan is obviously trying to become worldwide professional wrestling organization. And obviously one of the things they have to conquer is the United States. And so, you know, they had a few successful shows in California where they sold out their shows. And they do have a footprint on a cable television here in the States. And so for them to do that show in Madison Square Garden is obviously, big step towards, reaching that goal.
Do you think there'll eventually be a conflict of interest between them and Ring of Honor with them both promoting in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. And I said that long time ago when Mr. Hattori told me that they were just using, all the relationship. If you look at situation's a little different because with WCW and New Japan's relationship, which I was heavily involved in, as you know, and I don't know if because we had such a big footprint, WCW, that New Japan would, they would certainly not come here and promote their show in the United States. We done some stuff, I joined stuff obviously, and we taken their shows out of North Korea. Shows and brought it here as a pay-per-view. So we had a real good synergy. But for New Japan now, it's a different dynamic now because New Japan is a bigger company versus the Ring of Honor. So, I don't know how that dynamic going to work because if New Japan's what they believe that what they're trying to do, there might be a conflict of interest with Ring of Honor, how that going to get, how both those companies going to work together. That would be interesting.
Now, you made a couple appearances on air in WCW before you were introduced as a manager. One was in the Ric Flair reinstatement vignette, and the other was as a martial arts referee for Ming versus Jim Duggan at Uncensored.
Yeah, wow, what was it? Yeah, I was so nervous, I mean, like I said, especially that match, knowing Ming, I mean, Haku is like, he's legitimately the most scariest man in professional wrestling, if it's not that I have experience. And like I said, being 135 pounds, soaking wet, trying to be a referee, and I'm sure, I remember my role as a ref in martial art. I think that was a martial art match, and I was scared to death,
because you hadn't been a wrestler before, so that would have been like your first time in a professional
right
wrestling.
In a ring. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And you're on a pay-per-view in front of the
yeah. Talk about being. That seems to be a logic of Eric Bischoff to put me on a spot and see how I perform. I'm not sure. I don't know if that was stupidity or confidence he had in me. I'm not sure. I think it was probably the. See what what Sonny Onoo kind of thing, and but before that was I got hired, like I said, being I think my title was a consultant, to being able to make sure that I was a good pipeline through New Japan office, I mentioned earlier, and then making sure keeping them happy, make sure that the thing communication was smooth and that kind of thing. And Brad Rengens and Masa Saito was great help in that. We had a pretty good thing going between four of us, and Kevin Sullivan was always good to understand whenever we had a New Japan talent come to WCW. Remember, the original agreement was for them to use our talent, WCW talent, over there, and through that, we worked out a deal with New Japan talent, a great talent who was known in the United States, like Yushin Thunder Liger. You had a Masa Saito. You had a Great Muta. Those guys would come to our shows. Then New Japan realized getting the New Japan talent worldwide experience exposure, being on WCW platform, WCW television, that was good for New Japan, and kind of made them, bigger, the biggest company in Japan itself. So I think it was within year two, I was asked to bring their talent over here, and of course, This is when Nitro was starting to start. Eric needed more talent, so we worked out a deal that benefited everybody. We would hire their gaijin talent, the New Japan contracted American talent, like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and a few others on the WCW contract, which was a guarantee contract, and agreed to be able to use those guys can go to New Japan as they're working now, so that talent-wise, they got a guarantee contract, they got to work both companies, and for New Japan, they unloaded all this payrolls. And for WCW, they got a great talent that they needed for expanded television program. So it was a win-win-win deal for everybody. And then we started bringing the New Japan talent over. And I think that was Masa Saito's New Japan request. And that's how I got to level 2 of my experience with WCW. I have done some, front of the camera stuff. Like I done a movie, and a martial art movie, by the way.
You were Ping or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think it's I played I made a Chinese police officer, and filmed one production out of Toronto. I shot in Toronto and Hong Kong on that movie, right up in your backyard, and so I had some experience in front of the camera. And Eric says, "Well, none of these guys speak Japanese, Sonny. You're gonna be the manager for these guys." And that's how I got to be in front of the camera and got to be the Japanese manager. And then we had so much fun because at that time it was before the bubble, right? Before the bubble burst, where Japanese had flush with a lot of money. They were buying golf courses, buildings in the United States, So I played that character of rich Japanese guy who's buying up everything, and that's how we came up with the idea of WCW. Bobby Heenan selling me the Saturday night television program. That was one of the angles.
And I heard you tell a story that you actually got an excellent contract deal to be a manager because you only had a certain amount of appearances, and anything above that you would be paid extra, and you always
I remember Eric calling me up and saying, I was in office, and Eric says to me, he goes, "Hey, we have to redo your deal because you're on front of the camera." I said, "Okay, great." And Nick Lambros was the lawyer. And Eric said to me, "Look, I'm going to sign off on whatever you guys discuss, but you go work out the best deal you can with Nick." And and I walked in the office with Nick, and Nick says, "Okay, we're going to give you 25 days, in front of the camera, guaranteed." So.
Per year.
Yep. And I said, "Great." So, I get $25,000 guarantee bump on my pay. I said, "That's great." And I'm thinking, and that's what was offered to me. So I said to Nick, I said, "So what happens if I go past 25 days? He goes, "Oh, we'll put paper play, agreement clause in your deal." So I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Well, anytime you work past 25 days, we'll base you at $1,000 a day." And I don't know whether he realized that I was managing all these Japanese guys. And we had Ultimo Dragon at the time I was managing as well. And we were bringing in, people like Bo Nakano and Akira Hokuto, which is a great women wrestlers. They needed, Medusa needed somebody that caliber to compete against her. So, I was managing, I was fortunate. I was one of the, I'm really fortunate because I got to manage probably one of the greatest Japanese talent, known to certainly the U.S. audience. Everybody from, Muda to Chono to, Masa Saito to Liger, Kanemoto, Kensuke Sasaki. I mean, and Ultimo Dragon. And Akira Hokuto and Bona Kono, two of the probably most famous, Japanese and U.S. talent. And so I don't know if Nick understood that I was managing all these people. So, so he says, well, we'll just do the pay-per-play thing. And I said, wow. And I'm counting the days in my head, and I'm going, okay, well, that sounds like a great deal. And I went to, right out of Nick's office, I went to production to Annette Yother and Craig Lathers, who was our head of production. And I said, and they were on the booking committee as well. And I said, hey, I'm available. Book me on every show you can. So that was a very lucrative contract for me.
What would you guess your average appearances in a month would have been during the peak
I don't know what my months was, but I was on the road like 222 days, which was a lot more than 25 days.
Now, you mentioned Ming briefly. You never went into specifics, but I've heard you say in other interviews that you have seen Ming in action before in some barroom altercations. I was wondering if any one of those you could tell us some details.
There's some scary stuff that I cannot mention on public television. But I have seen, I think Colonel Parker was another manager. He had managed Ming at one point. And I think we were in Baltimore. And I remember we went out to eat and we came back and there was a police surrounding Ming. And Colonel Parker and his whole gimmick was a white hanky waving at the cops, asking them not to shoot Ming. I see Ming, gentlest man ever. I mean, he loved holding my babies. When my kid would come to, we were all, because we were like a big family at Disney when we were doing Disney TV taping. Kindest man, and so is Barbarian. But, they're just scary, right? I mean, you can hit them over the head. Because, they used to break coconut with their head. So you can mace them and they'll look at you. I didn't experience this myself, but I do believe it's that incident in Baltimore that I was told, and I don't know this to be true, but the other witness has told me that the female policeman had sprayed him with a mace. And Ming snatched that spray from the cop and sprayed himself and gave it back to her. I mean, I seen him bending over a guy over like a jukebox or something. And I think that was one of the Brian Knobb's cousin or something. And he had, literally the death grip on this guy. Randy Savage had to calm Ming down and tell him that he's got to go to his room now. I think those guys are great when they're drinking maybe, light beers, but you don't want to be around them when they're drinking the firewater stuff. I believe right now, I think last time I heard, and I'm not sure he still is, but he was a sales manager at the Toyota store in Florida.
I believe he still is, yeah.
Can you imagine now? You buying a car and you're trying to hag with... Tell your manager to come out here. I want to talk to him. I want to get a new carpet in my car. If you don't... And can you imagine Ming showing up? I mean, that would be a scary deal.
A lot of people say he would have done well in MMA, but from the stories I hear, he's doing a lot of tactics that would be considered illegal in competitive sports.
Yeah,
so I was wondering what your opinion is on how you would fight in the real sport.
Oh my God, I can't imagine. Your best defense on that is what we tell all our martial arts students is to turn and run fast as you can. Because I don't know, aside from having, sharp blades or a firearm, I wouldn't know how, because you couldn't hit them with a stick. They'll look at you. Those guys break coconut with their head when they were young. So, I mean, he literally, I think that man would literally rip you in half with his bare hand. I mean, that was his tactic anyway. Every time I seen him, he just grab him, his hands goes in a guy's mouth and thumb in a guy's throat. I mean, he just grab you and, you're paralyzed at that point, I mean, you got probably, 6.5 seconds before your light goes out. I mean, he's just a scary guy. And you're right, MMA, he'd probably be DQ'd. But, it's kind of, I think Ming's attitude is, tell your mama you won. I mean, he's a scary individual. One time, I think in the locker room, those guys were messing around and they kind of chased me around the locker room. Yeah, I mean, 135 pounds, all the kickboxing championship in the world is not going to save me, not even a little bit.
Now, for the locker room that you're bringing up now, wrestlers' locker rooms can be very political, and they can be almost like high school environments. On one hand, you were kind of Eric Bischoff's friend, so you were protected, but on the other hand, at that time, most of the wrestlers had worked their way into the business, so you were kind of an outsider, getting a good position without having to go pay your dues, really. Was there heat, or were you treated fairly well overall?
No, I think everybody treated me really well. I have, I'm sure there were people who had a perception of me that I was Eric Stooge or anything like that, and I made very effort not to go. I mean, if there was something that was affecting Eric, his position as a company, then I would let him know. But I think maybe there was a couple incidents that happened that I kind of smartened Eric up. He probably need to be careful, that you need to watch himself about that. But other than that, there was nothing like that. And everybody, in the room, everybody was kind. And you're right. And I'm sure there was a perception that I could go to Eric, because but I never, I don't think I ever used it. I never, although they might have had that perception, but I think being in the company and because I was on the road with the guys, I was in a locker room and probably lucky thing that happened to me was maybe because of that, I never really got ribbed. And I know some of the guys like Penzer, they would glue he always had this leather briefcase, and they would super glue his briefcase at some arena somewhere, and I know there was some ribs going on, and Steiners were pretty bad doing stuff like that, and you didn't want to offend those guys, because, they would tape you up like a mummy with athletic tape, and I seen a couple guys that happened.
You played a huge role in the big Collision in Korea events. This is kind of everyone talks about the Collision in Korea events when they're talking about the history of WCW. So I'm wondering if you could go into the whole detail of how they were set up and what it was like there, and the various issues that happened with some of the wrestlers and other talent.
Yeah, there's we can go. There's 4 hours.
About it.
Yeah, there's a 4 hours movie on that deal. First of all, Antonio Inoki had reached out to Brad Riggins and Eric Bischoff because to work by the way, Antonio Inoki was a member of a Diet. He was like a senator over there in Japan at the time, and pretty big politician. He reached out to Eric to get in contact with Muhammad Ali. And this was certainly before I was on front of camera talent. So Eric made that happen. I think in Denver we had matter of fact, I have a photograph here somewhere. I had a picture with Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki, and Muhammad Ali is one of my heroes, with all the stuff he went through, so I got to meet him. Eric put this deal together, and throughout that, Antonio Inoki was working on this peace festival and having this event in North Korea. Now, let me tell you how that kind of comes about with Japanese pro wrestling, and you got to kind of go back in history. Made the one of the most famous wrestler in Japan in professional wrestling history is Rikidozan, who was Korean born, who changed his name to in Japanese and became one of the father of professional wrestling in Japan. So here's Rikidozan, Giant Baba, Antonio Inoki, and these people come underneath that, the family tree per se, or pro wrestling tree in Japan. And so with Rikidozan being born in North Korea, and Antonio Inoki being professional wrestler / member of a diet, was trying to create this peace festival to bring professional wrestling to North Korea. Mind you, this is way before, right? Rodman and, but another gentleman that I got to know through wrestling. So as this Muhammad Ali meeting happens, and Antonio Inoki mentions, we're doing this peace festival, maybe you can join us to North Korea. And so originally it was New Japan Pro Wrestling guys going to North Korea for this peace festival. And because some of the talent, and because we had a talent exchange program, people that who was working for New Japan at the time, the Steiners, and Rory Hawk, and those guys was going to go to that show. I got invited, and Eric Bischoff and I got invited. Akira Hokuto was there, and Eric says, "Well, we're going to. Do you want to go to North Korea?" Yeah, I never been there, and knowing that it's kind of forbidden place to go, certainly as a U.S. citizen and certainly as a Japanese citizen. And I got a few calls from the government official telling me that he says, "Hey, we don't want you to go. If you go, we can't guarantee your safety." But in '86 I was in South Africa when there was still apartheid, and they told me the same thing back then. So yeah, we go. So I mean, we whether it was young and foolish, well, I wasn't that young, but it was an experience that we certainly not going to get another chance. So we went, and it was quite the trip, and I can go on and on about that experience. We got on a plane, and I'll do a short version of this. So we got on a plane in Nagoya, and it was a North Korean plane, and it was one of those DC-9, looked like a fixed wing plane. You know what I'm talking about? And I was fortunate enough to sit up front, which is considered, I'm sure, it was a first class. But mind you, we're talking about North Korean plane, and I remember flight took a while, but I remember the flight attendant came by and said something that we couldn't really understand. And it was really, you got to understand the contrast. We're flying first class on Japan Airline on 747 from United States to Japan. And then we get on this DC-10, And I remember planes start to rub up and we're going to take off. And I guess all of us used to put on a seatbelt. Some of the seat didn't have a seatbelt. So it was kind of, that's one of the things I remember.
Now, we interviewed Scorpio, and he told us that he got into a fight with Hawk.
I was there too.
Can you tell us your version about that?
Well, we're kind of cooped up in the country, right? First of all, everybody's, especially the American boys, all freaking out because we're flying in and we see the skyscrapers. And, they're actually flying us around the Capitol so we all see it, right? A lot of things was, propaganda. They want us to see a lot of things that they want us to see what they want to show us. And there was famine going on to North Korea at the time. So we're flying to the city, and there's like an 8-lane highway coming out of the city, right? And we're flying, and we see like clay, like not a lot of green, and we see the highway in the middle of the day, but we don't see any cars. So I'm going like, wow, So that's kind of first impression. We fly in. First thing they do is they take our passport. So you can imagine all the boys are coming up to me because I was kind of Japanese, their liaison for a foreign trip, and they're all going like, "Where's I need my passport." And I remember Ric Flair just freaking out, and basically, my answer was, "Yeah, they took my passport too, but even if you had your passport, where are you going? We got communist China to the north. We have DMZ to the south. There's no way out of here unless they let us out." So, like what they told us, and New Japan official told us, before we left, you got to be at your best behavior. And apparently Scott Norton forgot about that memo that he got for that one, because I'll tell you that incident in a minute here. But so getting in and to answer your question about Scorpio and Hawk, Hawk, a little hothead anyways. We talked about him and Randy, and so somehow he was, he didn't mince any words, and I kind of got an idea, because I don't know for sure. I don't want to mention it, but why they had a heat between them. but anyway, both being athletes and both being pretty buffed, and they're pretty tough guys, and word got a little heated, and did they get into it in the bus? There was a porta part, and I do remember that, but not knowing what all the detail was. But I remember Eric telling those guys, is, "Listen, we're in North Korea. Only way we can get out of here is that they let us out." To give you an idea about Scott Norton wanted to call home. I obviously wanted to call his wife, actually. But and the only way you can make a phone call out of North Korea, and they told us, right? And they told us that everything you do once we land, somebody's watching you. They're listening to you. So be at your best behavior, And mind you, they're giving us their best that they have to offer. But their best they have to offer is, nothing like you used to in Japan or certainly in the United States, And food, foods are, at best, and they're giving us their best. But, we're not getting, there's famine going on. We're not getting, prime ribs here, And
didn't Scott Steiner throw a piece of food across a room or something?
No, what happened was they had this big Korean barbecue thing going on in a park. This beautiful park, and the food that they was cooking was a stringy, something that resembled meat, looked like a little gristle thing, and I don't know if it was Scott. I think it was Scott. I'm not sure, but we're outdoors and there's people walking around smelling the barbecue. Whether it's a gristle or what, it still smells good, right? Especially if you haven't had a meat for probably a couple of years. And I think he kind of tossed one of the meat because he didn't like it, and I think it was his brother that said, "Hey, that's probably not very good. These people haven't had a food." I think kind of smartened him up on that. And what happened to Scott Norton was that he wanted to call home. So in order for you to make a phone call, you get on and they call the operator, and the operator calls China. You give them the number in China, because that's the only people they had a connection with, and they will call you back. They will ring you back, and it's like going back in time. So Scott gets on the phone in his hotel room and started, forgot that there was people listening, and I think he was talking to his dad, or maybe it was his wife Tammy. But anyway, complaining about the food and passport, and what a shitty place this North Korea was. And from what Scott told me, was phone went dead, and a few minutes later there was a knock on the door, and we all were assigned a translator, but they weren't really translators, right? They were like Secret Service people, I think there was a couple guys behind him. I think they were armed, and they kind of asked him, so why do you dislike our country so much? Or something to that word. Scott can tell you when you interview him. But I think his room was never cleaned after that. I did let him know that they didn't like what he said. And knowing that what happened to some of the people in North Korea after we've been there, the kid that stole the poster and all that stuff, who ended up dying, I think Scott was lucky to get home.
And I read in Ric Flair's book that he seemed to indicate that a lot of the fans were almost forced to come watch.
Well, I don't know, and all I know is that there was 2 television channels in our hotel room. One was all propaganda of Kim Sung-il, which was Kim Jong-un's dad at the time. Propaganda about how North Korea has defeated, Japanese in World War II, and United States and Korean conflict, and their history is a little different than ours, obviously. And then you had another channel that was nothing but professional wrestling.
Oh, really?
Let me tell you how big the whole thing was. The money, when we exchanged our money, had Antonio Inoki and professional wrestler on it. They printed money just for us, for that whole country had to use our money. And I asked why that was, and they didn't really give me a straight answer from the North Korean representative. But if you really think about it, it was so that they can control our dollar. So when we exchanged it, we didn't exchange it with their current currency, but with this new currency just made for us. So they can make sure that the dollar that we gave to that country, make sure it ended up in the government's hand.
I see.
So it was, that's how big the whole thing was. It was, if you saw the video of Collision in Korea, you saw that in the stadium where we performed, there was picture of these flip cards.
Yeah.
Of these missile flying, it's like a pixel, right? Each one of these little kid had a pixel of television, if you can imagine, on your television. Each pixel with these little kids flipping these cards. So the missile would fly off and, destroy, building in America and that kind of thing, And if you see the video, you'll see it. They told me they practiced for 6 months just for our event. So you can imagine how big this thing was, right? And to answer your question about what it said in Ric Flair's book, I know they didn't pay for the ticket, likely. Do they have to be there? They were probably invited to be there, and where the country works is they're probably better show up kind of thing. So yeah, Rick is probably right to a certain degree. But, you got to understand, you if you're North Korean, you're just trying to survive, right? And the government plays a big part of your life. And, you're actually going to get a holiday to go watch wrestling for 2 days. You know, would you want to be working, or would you want to be able to go sit and watch something that you don't get opportunity to see? So, you know, there was some what Ric Flair says true, but I'm sure there was, you know, these guys. They probably didn't sell that event as entertainment. It was more of, you know, competition between great evil American versus, you know, Asian guys who represented from New Japan, who Korean people I'm sure identify with. So Antonio Inoki, who had a great relationship with North Korean government, physically competing against, you know, what represents all the things wrong with the United States. You know, Ric Flair and his gown and his entrance and blonde hair and grand disc of Ric Flair. I'm sure it was a great, you know, show. And of course, Antonio Inoki goes over on that match, and you know, Ric Flair was graceful in his defeat, you know, and it was a great happy ending certainly for the audience. You know, it was a great payoff, and so.
Was it originally supposed to be Hogan, and Hogan didn't want to go, so they sent Flair?
Yeah, I guess so. But you know, certainly there was nothing lost by, you know, Ric Flair being there, and I don't know if Rick wanted to be there.
According to his book, no.
Probably not, right?
He also mentioned that Muhammad Ali was getting a little testy towards the end there, and he actually started talking normally at a few points, and he was worried about getting.
Well, I'll tell you funny, and I'll show you a picture a little bit later. So we went to visit. You know, they take us to these, you know, propaganda visits, right? You know, cameras. And by the way, you know, you have this great camera and lighting here. Eric Bischoff and I was together most of the time, and we had this lady Secret Service / translator that was assigned to us, and we would go to these various events. They have you know, the Gate of Triumph in France,
yeah.
in Paris. They have their version of that there, but it's the carving and monuments on the wall is North Korean citizen defeating, you know, the evil American and, you know, in Japanese. You know, happen to be, we're two of their greatest enemies. And they would ask us, was that in the background? They would stick a mic in my face. But their camera is guys literally doing this. And the lights that we have here are nothing like these lights. They're actually light bulb with the battery pack on a guy, because technology hasn't gotten there. And mind you, this is many years ago as well. So the guy's battery packs are like a Batman's utility packs. And one camera guy actually rolling the film. And that was the technology.
That's in the 96 or so.
Right, yeah. But we're still in 1954 technology, right? And they would ask us questions, you know, they would kind of bait us, right? And the question to me was, since they knew I was from Japanese born, so they would ask me like, so Sonny, don't you think that Japanese government should pay for the atrocity that they have committed against our country during the World War II? And knowing that I was going to get asked a question like that, so Eric and I were smart enough to go, you know, and my standard answer was, I'm born, 54, so I was not involved in, I don't have any experience of that, and I live in Iowa. That was my standard answer. Certainly you don't want to, say things that certainly offend them, and, I wanted to get home, so we were smart enough with that. And they would ask Eric, I remember one point, they would ask Eric a question like, United States government has dropped one bomb for each citizen of North Korea. And don't you think, and it was the same question, don't you think Americans should repay for the, the damage done to the American or the Korean citizen? And Eric had his answer, and, war is terrible, and I can't remember what he exactly said, but, he was smart enough to, kind of fade the heat, as we say in the business. And so it was like that. But getting back to the, so they would take us to one of the, I think we went to visit Ricky Dozan's home, where he was
right,
born.
'cause he was actually Korean.
Yeah. So we went to visit, and, old home, kind of like a historical thing. And as I'm walking back, I feel this in the back of my head. I go, what the hell? I turn around. It's Muhammad Ali jabbing me in the back of my head. So I, champ, you want some of this? And actually there's a picture, I have it here somewhere, of me and him squaring off. The Eric Bischoff snapped off a couple of pictures of me and Ali snapping, getting ready to go. I see, so me talking some of these. And Ali was so great that when he wanted to talk, when he wanted to be cool, he was all that. He was real sharp. And I think he was sharp all the time. But when he didn't want to talk to you, he was doing that. So, he was working us the whole time, I think.
Worked to his benefit, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just finally on that, do you think everything's going to work out in the end with that whole North Korea situation? Or do you think it's something that we really have to be careful about?
Well, I don't want to get political, but I don't quite understand why certain country can have the bomb and other country can't. And obviously, yeah, it's a scary thing. Japan is the only country that ever had that bomb dropped. So I'm very sensitive to the destruction of a nuclear weapon. But, if they already have it, how do you force somebody to take it down? You know what I mean? How do you do that? And especially when you got a history of people like Gaddafi, who agreed to get rid of their big baseball bat of nuclear weapon, where he ended up. That's probably not a good example. So I'm glad I'm not a politician. That's a hard answer. But I know one thing though. If you're a big guy like you, pick on a little guy like me, and if I only got one bullet, and that's my only bullet, and I have no other way to retaliate, I think that's a scary thought,
And of course, Dennis Rodman might be able to mediate that situation because I guess he's friends with both Trump and the North Korean leader.
Absolutely. I think Eric and Dennis Rodman should get together and work out a coalition, since they have, they have a first hand. I tell you how great Eric was. The translator / Secret Service lady. So all these people, I'm sure there's some kind of a ranking that they get, right? And they had this button, a little button, that they all wore on their lapel, and that was picture of Kim Sung Il, and I hope Eric still has it. Eric had, what's the word? Created a relationship the time we were there with our translator that she awarded him with that pin.
Oh, okay.
And I was flabbergasted, right? I mean, however their education system is, America is a great evil, and Japanese is probably number 2 on that list, and Eric has convinced this lady while they were interviewing us, and, our little time that we had, she gifted him that pin. And only people, she told us, to have that pin are, special citizen of North Korea.
I actually heard Eric talk. I think it was the podcast where he had you on either last year or the year before, where he was out for a run and they were so afraid of Americans that they were literally partying.
Wait, yeah, imagine, and you have to imagine this, right? So Mike Chinoy of CNN was there. He was one of the only first foreign reporter that got into North Korea. And we were in our hotel lobby because that's, we couldn't really go anywhere, so that's where we always hang out. And Deborah Wong of ABC News came over to our table and says, "Man, you what? Professional wrestling, really?" She says to us, she goes, "All the time I've been trying to get into North Korea, and they have refused my, request, but I get to come here and cover professional wrestling." She couldn't believe that she got in the country just to cover us, and that's how tight the whole thing was. And I think one of the first day, Eric was at, he is avid runner, and he didn't think anything of it. I think he only got to do it once because they told us he couldn't do it anymore. He put on his shorts and his t-shirt and went out for morning run. And we're downtown Pyongyang, in the city. And what I found out later on and during a week was that these people, it doesn't matter if you worked in a factory, whatever you did, they'd literally march. I mean, like, you come out of your house, another guy come out of their house, and they march to work. I mean, like, together, right? So by the time we got down the street, there'd be like, dozen of people, and they all, their suit might not have a hole in the elbow, but they're all wearing, and they might have been doing it for us, I don't know, but they were, very uniform, and they were, very formal. And imagine you're going to work, and you basically been propaganda and all the news that the evil, Westerners, suddenly the number one enemy being American, and you're walking probably all your life, and you see this guy running towards you. Eric said people parted like he was Moses. And he was told by our lady, the translator, a Secret Service person, that never to do that again.
Wow. Now we can see by your shirt, I'm guessing that's available probably at Pro Wrestling Tees.
No, these, I have a company I signed was called Lucha Otaku.
Okay.
And you can certainly go on the website and find it. And what's interesting about them is that Dan Mattingly, one of the guy, one of the partners, he is who understand profession. He was one of the head writers for WWE, and these guys are all out of California, Southern California. They're writers and production. Big time. One of the guys, Gary Jackson, worked for big ad agency, production company. They produce Car and Driver, Netflix TV shows, and stuff like that. So, huge, big time Hollywood production studio. That's where he works. But these guys, Mitch, Gary, and Dan, and myself has a project going, and they have a company called Lucha Otaku that I signed with. It's their company, and they manage some of the stuff I do. And they have a graphic designer. They manage musicians. They're really the first-rate group of guys that I work with, and they design some of the stuff. And this is one of the chibis that they came up with me doing the selfie, and we got everything from tennis shoes to the Converse-looking tennis shoes to T-shirt. A lot of wear hats, So they're great. So I work with them. What's great about them is that they understand the wrestling business. With Dan being worked with WWE. Matter of fact, I think he's the very first guy who wrote the one of the first movie for WWE. Or he was involved, one of the head guys that was involved in the movie part of their arm. So we have a project that we're putting together, and they're a great management company.
And why I was bringing that up is, of course, you invented the selfie. And I guess you were the first person to definitely, without question, popularize it, because you come out every week with the Polaroid camera and take a picture of yourself. So could you tell us how you came up with that idea?
Well, we all need just like any song, there's a hook, right? And my character being a rich Japanese guy, and of course people have seen the Japanese tourists with all his camera hanging around their neck and taking picture of everything, and that was kind of stereotype, So kind of getting that, and actually I wanted to take, to kind of cement that moment when, which is the greatest interest part on one of the biggest television show in the country, certainly professional wrestling show, and so. I couldn't really ask somebody to take a picture, so using that character, and I would take a Fuji camera, which was a Japanese. Remember the Instamatic throwaway camera that you wind, you pump the flash, and you took a flash camera. So I started doing that as kind of like my signature entrance thing. And I can honestly say, when I say innovator, I was a guy who was doing it day in and day out, and all the Nitro shows and all the Thunder shows and all the Saturday night TV taping we did. I was snapping those pictures, and of course that was before they called it selfie.
Right.
But
so by the time people started doing selfies regularly, you already had a whole collection of thousands
right.
of them.
Yeah, I have a collection of every guy I manage on selfie, So
and you have proof of it.
Oh yeah.
The Nitro episodes.
Right. So it's pretty cool, and I was lucky enough that actually selfie became a selfie, and so I kind of capitalized on that, and that's how people remember me. Managers were also very limited what we can do on the camera. So either I was kicking somebody and cheating and doing my round kick to somebody, or certainly my signature, entrance was taking that selfie as I was coming out on those shows.
And I've heard you say one of the reasons New Japan wanted their wrestlers on WCW TV was because it actually made them more popular in Japan, and I was wondering if you became more popular in Japan yourself, managing all these guys.
Well, the thing about, I don't know if that I'm sure people know who I am, and certainly in history of professional wrestling, because we were on television over there through Sumitomo Television. So we were on weekly TV show. The Nitro was certainly on, very popular. Thunder was on, because I know that because I did the TV deal. And we were on a syndicated show on various channels in Japan, so our show was on there. So but New Japan and Japanese style wrestling really don't use valet or manager. They're more of fair fight, strong guy fight strong guy, that kind of thing. So managers, and they don't play that storyline as much, although it became that they understood that creating storyline, that's how they get bigger than life, as NWO Japan was. The biggest angle that New Japan ever had, even to this day. I think they sold upward of $5 million was the NWO good one summer, which is another story of itself. But to answer your question, I think they know who I am. But, I didn't really manage. I have done a couple of big shows, like in Tokyo Dome, managed a couple of guys. But, I didn't really work in Japan that much. I worked mostly behind the scene more than anything else. So.
Now, you mentioned the NWO Japan. Is it true that Bischoff kind of got the idea for the NWO from an angle that he saw over in Japan?
Well, you have to ask Eric that, but I do remember, and I do distinctly remember asking Eric, and mind you, I was not in wrestling business. Earlier we talked about that the meeting we had was New Japan officials at TV Asahi. So the first time I'm smarting up to the business per se, and I think the angle was going on between New Japan and UWF, or New Japan versus All Japan. It was some of that company versus company angle, and I remember asking Eric, it's really too bad that WCW versus WWF at the time, you guys could never do a joint venture. Not knowing anything about the business, I asked him that question. So, whether he got that idea to creating, atmosphere of invasion angle, or however that NWO thing came about. But certainly, when New Japan got a hold of, remember, I was in nucleus of NWO Japan, right? Because Chono was my guy.
Yeah.
I bring Chono to a Nitro, and Chono on Nitro, on live Nitro show, disrespect me and rips his shirt open. He's got an NWO shirt on. So following week, I bring Great Muta to avenge my dishonor that was created to me by Chono, and create this match between Chono and Muta to avenge my honor, and Muta turns into NWO. That was Scott Hall and Kevin Nash of Japan version of NWO. Two of the biggest stars from New Japan goes against New Japan, creating New Japan fraction, and Scott Norton, Jeff Farmer, who was fake Sting, those guys certainly joined NWO. I think other wrestler, not Masa Saito, but Saito, and I think Tenzan became NWO Japan guys, and they feuded with New Japan Corps, kind of like parallel version of what they were doing in WCW. Right. And that became amazing angle for New Japan.
Was there any wrestlers from WCW that New Japan wanted from WCW, but for whatever reason they didn't like Japan and refused to go?
No, I don't think so. I think everybody enjoyed the experience of going to Japan. I mean, I'm sure some of the people probably didn't, weren't used to it, or wasn't happy about it. But I don't think anybody ever voiced opinion of not wanting to go. Certainly they had their, New Japan had their group of people. I mean, you take Jeff Farmer, man, he spent most of his time as a fake Sting, and his career at WCW was spent, I bet you a good 80% was in Japan. And Scott Norton was probably good 40% the time he was with WCW, he spent with New Japan. And of course, Benoit, Malenko, Eddie, they were going back and forth all the time. So.
And we spoke about this before, but Chris Benoit is always a popular topic on this channel. So I was wondering, being the New Japan representative, what your dealings were like with Chris Benoit over the years with WCW and New Japan.
Well, I was involved because of this talent exchange program, and what I told you before about the putting all those guys on a WCW contract. So being able to use our talent once they became our WCW contractual talent, that we were sending them back to New Japan at their request. And if they were involved in our program or our storyline, we had to work around that, I was pretty aware of what they were doing here in the United States. When their angle got finished, they would start their tour in Japan. So I had to work on that timing. So I was working close hand with Eddie and Dean and even Chris Jericho, and certainly Chris Benoit. And I have done some tour with Eddie and Dean and Chris, going over New Japan tour. Their tour was usually 3 weeks, but our guys would hit the big ones, like work there for 10 days and come back to WCW for our television. I got to know those guys, spending a lot of time together. When you're on the road, as every wrestler knows, especially when you're with a company, you're traveling 200-300 days together. They are your family. They are your brothers and sisters, and you become pretty close. And what I know about Chris Benoit was very gentle guy, intense, but very gentle. In-ring work was phenomenal. I think some of the things he did in the ring was, certainly at the time, was pretty phenomenal. He literally put his body out there for sake of entertaining us. Phenomenal talent, and we got to be friends, but not like close friends. I mean, we were close when we were on the road, but it's not like I called him, to say hi or to shoot, But one day I did get a call when this angle was going on between woman and Chris Benoit and Kevin Sullivan, and out of the blues I got a phone call from Chris telling me that he says, "Look, whatever you heard," and I said, "Chris, none of my business. It's not going to affect how I feel about you or anything we do, related to our work. It's not going to affect any of that." And he goes, "Well," he wanted to tell me his side, how that became reality, the angle became reality per se, and everybody knows about that story. So he was trying to explain himself to me, and he had no, I guess he cared how I thought, I guess, because of our friendship and because of, I played a part in how, in the business I did, and he was a big part of New Japan, WCW, business.
Would you have had any thoughts at all of what ultimately happened with Benoit? Could you see him doing something like that?
No, because he was a gentle guy. I mean, like I said, he's intense. I never saw him raise, all the time that my limited experience I had, never heard him lash out in anger. Aside from his television persona when he was on front of the camera, but behind the scene, he was quiet. If you could get a smile out of him, you were doing a pretty good job.
Now, Ultimo Dragon held numerous titles at the same time, and I heard you say in one interview that he actually held the WWE and WCW Cruiserweight title at the same time.
Yeah, it was really interesting. It's when he came in, he had I think he had 10 belts, 10 or 12, but 10 certainly significant belts. All Japan, New Japan, and after capturing WCW belt, Cruiserweight belt, he was the only person, and your audience can tell me that I'm wrong, but I believe, and this is a fact, he's the only person to ever held WCW and WWE or WWF at the time, Cruiserweight belt at the same time. Now, our television at WCW didn't want us to say that. And matter of fact, they didn't want to show those two belts together. So we kept it off the camera. But, I don't think anybody ever done it. Certainly collected all those belts all at once. And Ultimo Dragon is Yoshihiro Asai, and we got to be real close friends, and I still do a lot of event with him. And he's truly the international professional wrestler of mystery, right? I mean, he's in GQ magazine in Japan. You know, you see him going to Cuba every month. He's in Europe.
What's he doing in Cuba?
His best buddy is Fidel Castro's son.
Really, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean he's over there. You see him, his picture on a beach with his European thongs on him, which I kind of tell him. I said that's probably not a good look for him, but or him in Cuban Cohiba factory, and he's involved. You know, he's really tight with a lot of those government people over there. And at one point, Antonio Inoki and Ultimo Dragon, Ultimo set this thing up to do a professional wrestling event. Matter of fact, there's another company is working on bringing professional wrestling to our military folks in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And possibly doing a show in Havana as well. So that's in works as well. So, but getting back to Ultimo Dragon, he's really, you know, I think he's 52 now, but I don't think he lost anything. I mean, I did a show with him a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and he asked me to try to book him more in the United States because he'd been in Japan a lot. He didn't want to wear out his welcome in Japan, so he wanted to get booked here in the States. So he's been doing a lot of show here. And we have, a dozen booking between now to the end of the year in the United States.
And I think you also still book Ernest Miller, who you're very well associated with.
Yeah, Ernest and I, you know, we have that martial art history because he still fights. Believe it or not, he fought. Really? Yeah, he still fought. He fought last week in Miami. So
what type of?
It's point fighting.
Okay.
So we still get involved in that. He's well known in martial art world, sports karate world. I was in Atlanta at the Battle of Atlanta, and we were honored with Eternal Martial Art Award, and Ernest competes at this various events still. And matter of fact, on August 11th, we're going to be in Atlanta. A little north of south of Atlanta, we'll be competing in a wrestling event there, and we'll be there, you know, getting all team together, and we'll be performing there as well.
I think I may have seen the poster for that one. It looks like a stock card.
Yeah, it is. Ron Gossett is the promoter, and he's all WCW guys. You know, he's got all that contacts, so he's bringing all those all WCW guys together, and they do great shows.
I heard Glacier telling a story that Eric Bischoff once took him and Ernest Miller to one of these underground fights in Atlanta, and I was wondering if Eric ever took you to one of those.
No, but you know, I've been to a few. I've been to one in Hong Kong. You know, this stuff goes on even to this day. I mean, you can find those crazy guys, but some of and I had never been there with Eric, but you know, there's people that actually make pretty good money, you know, doing those bare knuckle fighting, you know, bare knuckle boxing almost, in parking lot and people's, you know, garage, you know, underground garage, and you know, people bet money. It still goes on.
Empty bars too sometimes. Yeah. In Canada, from what I
don't know, it looked like a scar you got. It looked like you were involved in one of those.
This question has come from a lot of fans, but of course I want to know it as well. Could you go into detail on the whole situation of your release, starting with Eric getting ousted and then? Yeah,
well, it was like in 1999, and I think Eric has left. They kind of ousted him in September. And believe it or not, I just signed a 2-year deal with Nick Lambros. So, no, it wasn't with the Nick. Maybe it was. I'm not sure who it was. But anyway, I just signed a 2-year deal. So my new deal was 2000 and goes into 2001. And this is when a lot of stuff was going on. There was actually amongst office people, they ousted Eric. A few of the VP got together and ousted Eric. And look, end of the day, way Eric ascended into the company, he was the right man for the job. As history will bear that. He's the guy who brought the company to that level. But on the flip side of that is when he was going, when ratings started to take the skid and stuff. There was many reasons for that, and because Eric was restricted how he could use the company, how the accounting was set up. I mean, I know more stuff than I probably should know, but Eric got blamed for it. And I think some of the guys who Eric leapfrogged when he became the president of the company, and I'm sure, they were waiting for Eric to fall. So, and I can't say I'm a casualty of that. I'm sure he played a part. One of the things I don't think people realize was that because of, by this time, New Japan deal was bringing, the talent exchange deal was bringing, $1 million plus merchandise we were selling, bring a lot of money into WCW because of a New Japan deal. And I was kind of right in the, center of that. But I don't think they took none of those into account, So when Vince Russo came in, he made a very public statement on the WCW audio saying that he was from America, that he didn't want any Japanese or Mexican on his American TV. Proceeded to terminate every Japanese talent, all the Mexicans off TV. And then at that point, he makes that statement. And I think maybe 3 weeks later, J.J. Dillon called me and said, and at that point I think I was managing Ernest Miller.
Right.
So
and JJ was head of talent relations.
Yeah, and I love JJ. He was very nice to me. All those guys, I have no qualm, but none of those guys. JJ said, "Hey, we're gonna use our clause in your contract, terminate you in 90-day deal." He said, well, if you sign the paper that I gonna send to you, we'll just pay you out 90 days and good luck to you. And I said, no, that's okay. I said, you know what Vince Russo said, right? I said that to JJ. I said, and
he didn't like Russo either when we talked.
No, of course not. And he was exposing the company, right? I mean, when I shouldn't say exposure from what's to come. So, and I think a lot of people mistake, my lawsuit. Because when I filed mine, there was a few other people that filed clearly discrimination lawsuit. He could have fired me, or the best thing they could have done was just tell me to settle at home. And there was nothing, and your talent can't do anything about that. If you're getting paid, you can't do anything about it. But you can't make that kind of public statement and then terminate you because of your national origin. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it seems like every lawyer that I talked to jumped on that, but he was, people believe that was a class action lawsuit. It wasn't. It was a bunch of other people, and I had nothing to do with.
There was a class action.
No, there was never a class action assault lawsuit. It was my suit was mine alone.
And then the other people had individual lawsuits.
Yeah, everybody had an individual lawsuit. Yeah.
Okay.
But
it was the same lawyer eventually.
Eventually, I think there was a couple different lawyers, but eventually, Kerry Ector was the main guy. It was certainly my attorney. It's pretty cut and dry, and there was a lot of evidence about the stuff that went on. But, and I got asked a lot of questions about other people in office, and, my focus was, my stuff was pretty simple. This is what the new guy said, the guy who replaced Eric Bischoff, and they took all of us off TV.
And you ended up getting an out-of-court settlement.
Yeah, they settled. It would have been pretty ugly, I think, certainly for the exposure part. There was a lot of stuff that during the discovery that was found. It was a few of the officer of the company, some of the attorney of the company, calling me a derogatory names, and that was exposed during the discovery. It wasn't me saying it. It was somebody heard one of the attorneys saying that about me. So there was stuff that came out that was, whether that's what they said, but 20 some years ago, I'm glad thing happened the way it happened. My kids were, timings, right? Life's supposed to, I have no regrets whatsoever. My oldest was, I think, junior in high school at the time. And so, I got to, because when you're on the road, man, you miss a lot of stuff. And that's one of the regrets about being on the road. So, I got to be home and getting back to my old martial arts business and my automobile business. So I got to spend a lot of time, with my family and watching my kid grow up. So, retrospect, it worked out great for me.
And was that the end of the New Japan deal with WCW?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I don't think they took into account. That they were literally taking money out of their pocket. I think the deal with the talent exchange thing was over $1 million. And merchandise they were buying from us, it was insane. We were sending, a pallet of T-shirt on FedEx to New Japan for every big event they had. And they were selling those things out before the show started.
Yeah, I guess Vince Russo was one of the terrible decisions that WCW made that not a lot of people argue other than Vince.
Yeah. It's too bad. I know, guy like Bill Bush who took over the helm of the company right after Eric Bischoff. They ousted Eric. He was one of the principal people that started the coup to get Eric out, and I believe he was the one who made the decision to bring Vince Russo in. Probably one of the most fatal mistakes they probably ever made, and I think they try to, I know they brought Eric back 6-7 months later and try to realizing the mistake that the guy who's in, accounting guy can't run that business. From the production side to having the vision and being able to negotiate the wrestlers, that takes very unique skills.
You have to be able to deal with the wrestlers and have experience dealing with those type of personalities.
And be able to deal with the corporate people that at Turner.
Yeah.
And there wasn't too many people, even to this day, I think could have done what Eric did.
And he tried to buy WCW in a bizarre deal that it ended up being sold for far
less. Yeah, I remember when all that, because I was in contact with Eric.
Right.
At time.
Would you have had a part in that company had it happened?
I would hopefully think so. You know, we would have probably continued our relationship in New Japan. And there was a lot of other opportunity in Japan that we brought to the table. We talked about the K1 earlier, which is became really popular in the United States before UFC.
Yeah.
What was great about K1 was a guy like you, heavyweight fighting. There was no weight class, remember, and that was just two big men, generally, 200-pound plus guys, going at it. Was kickboxing, matches with it. And when you got guy your size kicking and punching, man, and you know what? One of the biggest things we sold about that event was it was like 89% knockout rate. You watch K1, you're gonna get somebody get knocked out, and and tough guys out of all over the world. A lot of Dutch guys, Ernesto Hoos, and we introduced those guys that they were never gotten exposure into the United States audience. Matter of fact, Bob Sapp, who was WCW power plant guy, went over there, got involved through, because you got to understand he was a worker, but he got involved and they do shoot work over there.
Yeah.
And he made he even to this day he's so famous. He had his own commercials. He was a big man on the campus over there. And it still is. At one point, I think we certainly missed a deal on this. Was the Pride? I made a deal with Pride. Pride was, probably a little above USC before Fertitta brother got into UFC, and Pride was, raw version of UFC. They fought in the ring, same kind of rule.
No weight classes.
No weight classes, and I made a deal with Pride, president of Pride, to bring that to United States as WCW/Turner was going to be the distribution arm of their pay-per-view. I made that deal happen, but it never got signed, which was unfortunate, because I would like to believe if we would have done that, Pride would have been bigger than UFC, and Pride UFC ended up buying Pride many years later, but it would have been the other way around if we would have been involved.
I still think they had the most entertaining fights in Pride.
Oh, I agree. Don Fry and,
Yeah. And what do you think of the crossover now with, we've had some bad situations like CM Punk crossing over to MMA, but Brock's going back to UFC, it seems to...
Yeah, I think, Brock is the legit, collegiate wrestler. So I think going in MMA, wrestling is a very important component, because whether you can punch or kick, but like in a lot of actual fight in the street, you end up on the ground, and if you don't know, how to fight on the ground, you're gonna have, you can be the best kickboxer in the world, and it's not gonna help you. Right. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with submission wrestling and that kind of thing. So to answer your question, Brock having that background, I think helps him, and being a physical specimen that he is, I think he can be competitive champion in that world of MMA. Now, I don't know background of CM Punk. Seems like a very intelligent, guy, but, I know it's a two different world, right? Although, some of the guys are legitimately badasses, but I don't know if you want to go into that world.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't think CM Punk really had any history in combat sports.
Yeah, and that's a tough learning curve,
Now, you own numerous businesses over the years. What do you do
Yeah.
it now, and how many businesses do you own now?
Let me think. Well, before I got into wrestling, way back, I had a martial arts school and health club, and that I gave that up when I went into professional wrestling because obviously I couldn't do both, and certainly expect my wife to keep doing that. She was an aerobic instructor, and so having 4 children kind of makes that tough deal for her to handle. So I sold the business, but I kept my car dealership. Now, one of the reasons I got in the car dealership is because I love Ferraris and Porsches and all those exotic cars that I aforementioned, and tags on those things are expensive, right? So I was thinking back then, I said, God, I only drive these things on sunny Sunday. How, why do I have to pay the tax for this thing for a whole year? So, and one of the things I said, how I can avoid that is being a car dealer. So I went out and got me a car dealer license. But it's not an easy thing to get. You have to have a premises and garage and office and all that stuff. But I jumped through the hoop and so I had a license. And then I still do that. I because of internet. If you ask me to find you a black, whatever you want, Acura MDX, 2018 was 8,000 miles. I can find you one in about 10 minutes. And get your wholesale price, and I'll charge you a fee to buy it. And that's the kind of thing I do. So I keep my license so I can do that for my friends and stuff, and make a couple bucks. But I work with Fight TV, acquiring interesting, combative entertainment sports from all over the world. And so I get to do that with Mike Weber that I mentioned earlier. And few project was like Lucha Otaku. They have a project going on, and of course, I showed you the tape, the new show of Dojo Pro out of Nashville that people can watch on Fight TV, and certainly if you have Amazon Prime, you can watch there for free. And
Eric's involved in that one. For people who don't know.
Yeah. So I get asked as a consultant on the different projects, and there's a couple company out of China there's MMA company that wants to come in the United States. So and because of my international consultant experience that I had, so I get to do some project that I like to do. But one of the project that I think is going to be that you guys going to really see coming up, certainly on we're talking about kickboxing that you're going to be involved in. There's a company called Knockout, which is owned by same company owns the New Japan Pro Wrestling. They do amazing kickboxing fight out of Japan. Company called Knockout, owned by Bushiroad, which is the parent company of New Japan Pro Wrestling, and you'll be hearing about them. I mean, they're great entertainment. They do a lot of their event, and many of the big arena in Japan, including Korakuen Hall, or many of the pro wrestlers who goes to Japan to work over there. And I work with Kaz Hayashi of Wrestle One, which is Great Muda is the chairman of that company. So I keep in touch with a lot of those guys that I have a relationship with, and I get project to help out.
And I heard you say you worked for UPS for a year on a dare. What kind of crazy person are you?
So we're, if you describe, if somebody will say, what were you doing, before you were 28 years old, I would describe myself as a karate bum. And Eric Bischoff would come probably in the same group, because we would we would make enough money working for either for karate school or having karate school, being able to pay rent and being able to to eat, put a food on the table. But our most interest was traveling around the country, going to a karate tournament, you know, dating the local ladies, and fight like crazy, and you know, and come home. You know, try to test our skill. Atlanta, Georgia, North Carolina, you know, Texas, with all the scary fighters out of Texas, by the way. You know, and California is number 2, and so we got to travel doing martial arts, and so during that period of time, my girlfriend at the time showed up at she was waitressing, and I think she got laid off, and I'd taken her to unemployment office, and I was sitting there waiting for her to get done with her business, and a gentleman walked up to me and said, "Hey, are you here for the UPS job?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, what are you here for?" I was just here with my friend. And the guy says, "Well, we have this UPS job, and you should apply for it." And I'm looking around like, why me? You know? And looking back now, they were trying, you know, we're in the middle of Iowa here, right? So you're not going to see too many Japanese or Asian guys in this town unless they do
No.
that. Unless,
I haven't seen any in the States so far.
you haven't seen any, right? Unless you go to a Chinese restaurant or go to a nail place or something, which I get mistaken for, by the way. The guy who does nails. Either I'm a doctor or a guy who's doing your nail. Anyway. So what happened was he says, "Well, you should come in 9:30 tomorrow and apply for this job." You know, mind you, I have no insurance. I'm a karate guy, you know, making enough money just to kind of get by. And UPS back then was actually paying real good money. And the guy says, "You only work 3 hours a day." I go, 3 hours a day and I get benefits? And the guy goes, "Yeah. And if truck don't come in because of snow or something, you get paid guaranteed money." I said, "Really?" So I said, "Yeah, I might consider that." And on the way home, I was talking to my friend, and you know, my girlfriend says, "I dare you to go work for somebody, because you can't work for, you know," and I haven't worked for anybody. You know, I've always had my own martial art thing going on or something like that. So, $100 bet. I went and worked for UPS. You know, it was like we had to get there like 4 in the morning to unload the truck, you know, and it was like a no-brainer job. You just climb in the truck and unload the truck on the conveyor belt. It wasn't really like a hard job or anything. But, so, to the day of 1 year, I walked up and I said, "Thank you very much for the experience." And that's really the only job, like real job I ever had. I mean, like, you know, labor job.
I hope you made use of the benefits while you had them.
Yeah. But you know, when you're young and healthy, you didn't, you know.
Do you have any Ric Flair stories from being around him in WCW?
That I can tell on the camera, or yeah. When we were at Disney, and Rick loved going to sushi bar, and obviously all of us who traveled all over the world, you know, and where they diet, you know, sushi or eating, you know, lean protein was a, you know, part of their diet. So we would go, and I remember Ric Flair that I got to know, because the Ric Flair that you see on television is really the Ric Flair that you see every day. You know, that's him. You know, very kind, very generous. You know, bigger than life guy. He was always gentleman to me, and very kind in many ways. And I remember we were at Disney, and there was a Swan Hotel. It was attached to Disney, and they had a sushi bar there. And this is before sushi was, you know, blown up like it is now. You can, you know, even in Mason City, Iowa, we talked about even have a sushi place. So before we had to drive 2 hours up to Minneapolis to get any of that.
I hope there's some Asian people at the Mason City one.
Yeah, I
By the
think
way.
so. You probably want to stay away from, Mexican guy making sushi for you. I mean, just saying. No disrespect, but Ric Flair had charged up, and he was being Ric Flair, charging up. I think bar tab, sushi tab was like $5,000, and I don't think his credit card worked.
Oh, okay.
And I remember Eric telling me that he had to. I think somebody called Eric, and Eric had to have a company pay for that tab.
They didn't make Rick wash the dishes for the rest of the day.
No. Rick was played a big part in WCW. I mean, he's one of the big part of WCW's success.
Now, the other thing was I heard you talk about you used to be close with Perry Saturn on another podcast, and I was just wondering if you could give us an update on him.
Yeah, I just got a call 2 weeks ago from Eon, which is a producer who's doing the kind of documentary on Perry Saturn. So Eric, Perry and I got to be real good friends, being on the road together, and he's just a genuinely great guy. One of the neatest guy I know. I mean, he folds everything, right? I mean, like he's, if you open up his drawer and his closet, you got the socks, rolled up, and underwear rolled up, and t-shirt folded, because he was, the army guy, right? I mean, I think he was an army ranger or something like that. Anyway, great guy. So when the Benoit, Malenko, Eddie, and those guys left Radicals, I think they were called, right? They left WCW and went to WWE. He was a big hit for that, I think, as far as that kind of worker, because they were all great workers, great entertainers. When they left, we kept in touch, and I think when and I'm not sure how the timing went, but when WCW got bought out by WWE, a lot of those talent got their contract renegotiated. I think that's the best way I can say it. And I think Perry decided not to take their offer. And I don't know the detail or, what the cut was and all that stuff. So Perry reached out to me and asked me if I can help him get a job with New Japan. I called my friend Yuji Nagata, who I managed with WCW, and we made a trip to Japan, Perry and I, and met with their office, and Perry got a job there, and it was a pretty good gig. If I recall, it was something like $15,000 a week, so many weeks, maybe 10 weeks guarantee or something to that sort. I can't really remember. It wasn't, I wasn't really, but it was a pretty good deal. Perry was really happy because, he didn't have to be on the road, and he'd be home, be able to work and do other things, do some independent shots and stuff like that. So he was really happy about that. I think he worked with Barnett over there, who still does some announcing for New Japan.
Yeah, he's the Access TV announcer or something.
And I think one of Perry's job was trying to teach him how to do some pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And something happened over there, and he got laid off. And Perry came home one day, and his wife didn't pick him up. I found this out later that, and I didn't even know he got laid off from New Japan. But what happened was that his wife had filed a divorce paper and protection order, so he couldn't even go back into his own home. Perry had a company called Saturn Enterprise, and he'd been sending all the money from New Japan to direct deposit into his account in the United States. Well, it turned out, according to Perry, all the money was gone. A lot, you know, upward of 700, something like that. So, and I think kind of spiraled downhill after that. I didn't hear from Perry. I got a call one day, and Perry on the other line telling me that if I, true story, asked him if I could Western Union him $20. And I, you know, and this is the man who used to buy, you know, $1,500 Versace shirt, right? I mean, when we're in Miami, when we're in a Bruise Cruise, that's what he was doing. And I go, what are you talking about? He says, well, he told me he was homeless. So, of course, I said, well, I'm going to send you a ticket. I want you to get on a plane, come up here, and, you know, we'll figure things out. And Perry said, no, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? He had this huge dog. I mean, it was a big dog named Techno, with the dog's name. And he said, I can't leave Techno. Techno and I, you know, he was living under the bridge somewhere. So I said, why don't you do this? I said, I'll send you a ticket, a one-way ticket. You come up here and I'll give you a truck and a trailer, and you go back to Atlanta, pick up your stuff, and, you know, come back. And I moved him up here to Mason City. You know, and I didn't know all the demons he had, and you know, physical ailment he had. He was bouncing here in north end of the town for a while. I booked him on a couple shows, you know, doing some personal appearance. It was good money, but you know, one day I get a call from a promoter and saying, hey, Perry never showed up. And I go, how can he not show up? You know, 80 miles down the road. And he go, like, disappeared for like 3-4 days. And Perry would tell me, you know, I catch up to him a few days later, and he would go, yeah, I got lost. You know, so I knew there was something. And I think he was, you know, getting overwhelmed by his demons, you know. And he was living in one of my building that I owned, or one of my apartment duplex, and he got to a point, you know, power was getting shut off, and you know, I just, Perry, you can't keep doing what you're doing. And I remember he had a girlfriend and ended up moving up north to Upper Lee, the town you probably went through, and I kind of lost track of him, and he'd been working at some factory up there, and he kind of got himself back together. But last year, matter of fact, almost exactly a year ago, there was a Comic-Con in Alberley, Minnesota, a small town, and him and I did some autograph signing, and you know, kind of rekindle our relationship. At that time, the guy named by Eon, who's doing a kind of story on Perry, and he'd been trying to get his, you know, and I did find out he got it. So he's medical from his service. So he's going to be getting some money, and he's going to get himself back together. But he does have, you know, probably have what is that, ATC, or the brain damage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Concussion.
Yeah, concussion syndrome, and you know, he does
CTC,
have. Yeah, that's right. And he does have a lot of you know, physical ailment, and I don't think he can work anymore, but he can certainly still make some personal appearance and stuff. But you know, those guys, and I have always said this, the amazing thing about professional wrestler, you know, they're tightropers that works without a net. What I mean by that safety net is that social safety net. You know, you get fired from, you know, making decent money, certainly above average money, and then if you don't have the skill set, you know, I was fortunate enough that I owned business and stuff like that before I went in, and certainly I relied on that afterwards. But some of these guys that, you know, young guys, you know, early 20s, goes into business, worked, ride the wave for a few years and gets hurt. They don't have skill set to, get back into normal life as we call normal. And I think that's and that's where the pitfall is. And of course, the unfortunate thing about a lot of these guys is they work hurt. The system is designed so, if you're in a storyline and you get hurt, and you and I in a storyline, you get hurt. Guess what happened to both of us?
Yeah.
And so they work hurt. And I think just like any athletes who try to extend themselves when they're hurting, they get involved on pitfall of the painkillers and stuff like that. And I think that's the biggest demon that they have to deal with.
And your son had a pretty successful amateur wrestling career. Do you want to just tell the fans about that?
Yeah, my son, which is my youngest, once again, I was home to watch him, taking him to all the wrestling youth tournaments and getting him involved with one of the best youth wrestling program is in the country. Believe it or not, it's here in Mason City, Iowa, at the local college at the North Area Community College called the NIAC. It's a guy named by T.J. Seabolt, who was full-time state champ in the state of Iowa, which is saying a lot. He's the head coach. And Kaz was a runner-up in his junior year, and he won a state title in senior year. He was runner-up to the Dan Gable, which is Mr. Iowa Wrestlers Award, and he went through his senior season, undefeated and without any offensive. Nobody took him down his senior year, and he wrestled for Wartburg College, which is I think 13-time NCAA D3 wrestling school. He went there. He wrestled for the first 2 years. He had an injury on his knee, and that kind of ended his career as a wrestler. But he did pretty good. He beat a couple of national champions as sophomore and collegiate level, and he's been successful. But he does what he done. He actually graduated a few months ago with a digital media production major. So hopefully he'll be doing what you're doing.
Well, I used to amateur wrestle too, so
there you go. You guys got.
Maybe it's in our blood to,
all right.
To get into editing. After.
Great.
So there were some fan questions you may have seen. I asked on social media last night if anyone had fan questions.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you a couple of them. What made you decide to stay living in Iowa?
Well, actually, it's my children, right? So as you can see, you've been here for a day or so. We're 2 hours from Minneapolis. We're 2 hours from Des Moines, Iowa. Rochester, Minnesota is about an hour away, which is famous for a Mayo Clinic. So, and really for ease of life, right? I mean, we're 10 minutes from everywhere in this town. You want to go to a movie? It's 10 minutes. You want to get back to your hotel? It's 10 minutes. You want to go to a grocery store? Everything's 10 minutes. There's no traffic. Traffic at 5 o'clock here is, 6 cars on the main drag. I mean, I can't imagine how people live in New York because I go there often enough, or LA. I can't imagine spending, 25% of my life in traffic. So ease of life, and it's a great place. I know what my kids are doing, or at least when they were in school, I know who they were with. It's away from, it's 180 degrees from Tokyo and or any big cities. So that's why I settled here. But now that my kids has graduated, my youngest, Kaz, so we're probably going to move south, get away from this weather. You experienced a little bit of that yesterday.
And I saw the picture you posted the other week.
And the tornado just right south of us. It just blew the things up. I mean, it was like, it was like watching a literally, movie. Just tornado comes and there's the building and he comes over and goes. It doesn't just like rips anything. It just blew up. So that's the scary stuff. But you know, chance of that happening in you is it's better than hurricane. So, but I think I'm gonna move closer to where my daughter lives down in Dallas. So we're probably gonna do a summer bird thing. You know, kind of still keep my home here and move back and forth.
And was there any interest in putting the cruiserweight title on Yuji Nagata in '98?
I don't think so, because Yuji was considered heavyweight, and that's how they portray them in New Japan, and it always has been. So, you know, Yuji as a Japanese guy goes, you know, he's a collegiate, you know, an amateur wrestler. He's a legitimate, you know, he's got a legitimate wrestling background. You know, his brother is a silver medalist, and I think in Greco, in Olympics. So yeah, I mean, Nagata is a real legit deal. Those families are, but no, I think, you know, I wish we could have done more with Yuji, you know, when I was with him, but it's one of those interesting. They bring their young boys over here to WCW. He was certainly a young, you know, green guy, and get him exposure and get him seasoned here, and they go back to Japan. But lucky for us, you know, that I was here at WCW. So naturally, being Japanese, he was my, you know, one of my stable guys, and you know, I got to manage him and along with Ultimo Dragon. We did an angle with Ultimo Dragon and Yuji Nagata, and you know, it was a good stuff for him. I think he got a lot of TV time because we were together, and you know, of course, he's even to this day, he's still a big star in New Japan.
And do people that don't know that Sonny Onoo is your real name and think that it was maybe a wrestling name ever accuse you of just being like a Sonny Onoo fan that slightly changed your name, Sonny Bono? I mean? Oh
yeah. Well, no, actually, I did have a girlfriend named Cher.
Oh really?
Yeah, back in high school phase. Yeah. So, but let me tell you how my nickname actually, which is Sonny, came about. Okay, it doesn't have nothing to do with Sonny Bono. So, who ran into a tree in a skiing accident and died, by the way. Yeah. It's unfortunate. But so when I first came to this country as an 11-year-old, not, you know, I didn't speak in English, and of course, you know, I'm amongst my peers at that age. You know, they can't say Kazuo, which is my first name. So, you know, obviously they had to come up with a name for me, you know, first day at school.
It is a cool wrestling name, though.
It turned out to be, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're going to call you Sonny. You know, because you come from country of rising sun, right? And that's how Sonny came about. Some kid named me Sonny, and that was that.
And someone asked who produced the Ninja Star Wars commercial and who was the female voice that said Ninja Star.
You know, I don't know who did the voiceover. You would have to ask Eric, and I don't know if you even remember, but Eric Bischoff did produce and directed the Ninja Star Wars commercial.
And the final fan question, which I thought was a pretty good one, was why did WCW never use Road Warrior Hawk and Kensuke Sasaki as the Hellraisers, even though they both were in WCW?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think Animal was hurt at the time, and those guys were, you know, Road Warrior was a big part of New Japan's gaijin, you know, what means foreigners, stable, and so to keep that, you know, gimmick working, Kensuke Sasaki kind of took Road Warrior's place, and they became Hellraisers, and you know, the spike shoulder pad and all that. I got to tell you a funny story that reminds me of something, but so I don't know if New Japan didn't want us to. I don't believe that, but you just never. I think they wanted to probably want to keep that Road Warrior gimmick intact, you know, and so I really don't know why. But I will tell you a funny story about Hellraiser that I worked with. So, very famous comedy television show. I get a call through WCW office that they want to use Road Warrior Hawk and Kensuke Sasaki on this show is called Owarai, which means to laugh. A real famous TV show in Japan. And I get a call and they said, hey, we're going to fly you, me, and Hawk and meet up as Kensuke, and we're going to do a skit on the beach where we're going to have a wrestling ring and you guys going to beat up these bunch of little 90-pound Japanese comedians, famous comedians. I couldn't quite understand what was so funny about that, but, you know, free trip and, you know, good payday. So I called Hawk and I said, Hawk, you want to do this? I checked with the office. Office says we can do it. He said, yeah, I'll do it. You know, his gravelly voice. He said, I'll do it if I can get my girlfriend to come along. So I called the television studio in Japan and they said, sure. So, not knowing how the show is about, we go over there and they pick us up, take us to this resort town. Next morning, we're on the beach. We meet up with Kensuke, and they got all their painted face and gimmick on. And if you can imagine, matter of fact, you might be able to find this on the YouTube somewhere. There's a wrestling ring, but it's only 3-sided rope, so the camera can, you know, shoot better.
Yeah.
But the funniest thing is one side off the apron is, you know how they do the teppanyaki where the Japanese guys do the cooking?
Yeah.
Okay, the hot plate.
Yes.
The whole side of this ring is hot plates. And it's really hot. Right? There's a guy actually cooking there.
Right.
You know, on the camera, on a TV show. On this side, on the back end of it, it's a mat with all that sticky glue, like a fly trap glue.
Yeah.
Where you can't get it off, kind of glue.
Yeah.
And this side is all this little buttons on it, but if you touch it, it explodes. The firework goes off.
Okay.
So the whole gimmick is this comedian comes in, challenge the Hellraisers on a wrestling match, and gets tossed into one of these spots. I mean, really abusing these guys. I mean, they were.
It's on TV, so they could have worked it.
Right, but they didn't tell us anything. So I'm translating and I'm on a, you know, I'm playing not the manager, but in essence the real manager on this television show, you know. And Hawk is asking, "What do you want me to do, brother?" And I'm going, "I guess you're gonna wrestle these guys." You know, and these are comedians, so they're trying to slap him and trying to do the chop, and you know, obviously these, you know, our guys aren't selling. They're not going to sell anyway. So, you know, they finally get pissed off and, you know, picks him up over their head and walks around and throw him right off the ring apron. And I'm going to tell you, I watched him afterward. Because they threw one guy into the hot plate. The guy literally got burnt all over his body. I mean, they were cooking stuff on there and serving people. I mean, it was ridiculous. One guy got thrown. He got all blistered from all the fire explosion going off on him. The worst guy was the guy who got thrown on and those sticky fly trap thing. They couldn't get that thing off. I remember the guy was working on it hours, like 4 hours afterwards, trying to take a credit card and trying to scrape those. You know, and all their hairs are coming off their body and stuff. It was horrible. But I'm sure that episode's on television somewhere. And you know, we had a great time, but yeah, that was one time I got to kind of become a real manager for Hellraisers.
Wow, those comedians are...
Oh, I feel really bad for him because I remember one guy was going bald and he had like serious comb over stuff going on, you know, and he's one of the guys who got thrown into that glue stuff and they couldn't get that stuff off his 8 string of hair that going over, and I think they ended up shaving his head.
Wow. So where can fans follow you on social media that don't have you?
Well, I'm on the Twitter, but I'm not really on there very much. I do Snapchat. I think my kid just finally showed me how that works, but I'm on a Facebook on the Sonny Onoo, and there's a fan page now because I have, you can only have like 5,000 followers, and so I have a fan page on there, and Lucha Otaku guys who set me up. So and you can buy these merchandise, and we're working on we're talking about the selfie camera. They're gonna be coming out with Instamatic Fuji camera, Sonny Onoo Fuji camera that I'm gonna hopefully I'll get it pretty soon. So I'll have it. I'll do a selfie, then I can hand it out to the fans as we do some independent shows and just having a lot of fun.
So on Twitter, you just search Sonny Onoo and
yeah. Easiest way to probably get a hold of me is through Facebook.
Facebook, and if they want to book you or any of your wrestlers.
Yeah, they can PM me. Matter of fact, I just got a call yesterday. I'm down in Corpus Christi. They're gonna have a lucha show, and believe it or not, and you were asking me earlier about the relationship I have with a lot of the boys. I kept in touch with obviously many of the Japanese guys, but Mexican guys as well, like a Damien 666 and Silver King and La Parca, LA Parca. So I'm booking, they're doing a lucha show, so I'm booking all these guys over there. And so I'm still playing the manager role behind the scene as well.
And you're booking Ultimo Dragon, Ernest Miller.
Yeah. Tokyo Monster is one of my new guys. I think he's one of my, I think I can take him to another level. He's one of the best independent guys out there right now, and he's got a great look, and he's signed with the Lucha Otaku as well. So he's getting some great looking T-shirts and merchandise for him. So a little bit later on, I'll show you some of the merchandise we got. You saw the tennis shoes, which is I think it's great, right?
Thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate it. And to close this off, is there anything you want to say to your fans?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do there, with certainly on Hannibal TV, is that people don't get to see you very often, but you need to come over here so we can do a selfie.
You're gonna make me go on camera without warning.
We gotta. What you gotta get paid when you go front of the camera? Is that what the deal is, or what's the deal?
You know the deal.
So I'm getting him a payday. All right, so here we go.
Gotta show off the bicep.